Nations have always relied on various means to achieve their foreign policy objectives. Not all of them were military. Others have been diplomatic or cultural, like language, music, or student exchanges. Media certainly is one of those soft objectives, one of the newest and most persuasive. After World War II, most combatants were exhausted. Continental Europe lay in bombed ruins. Britain was bankrupt. In Asia, China, Korea, the Philippines, and others were recovering from years of Japanese invasion and occupation. There was worldwide hunger and economic calamity. World alliances realigned from a European centered world now into a world divided between communist bloc and the West. The Cold War is the name given to the long struggle between East and West, between freedom and totalitarianism, free market economics versus controlled top down state economy. From the end of World War II to the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, the prospect of nuclear exchange was a threat to civilization itself. The Cold War was fought geographically, politically, economically, culturally, and this Cold War got hot many times over the years, usually through proxy wars, but sometimes through direct confrontation. In just 20 years, from World War I to World War II, the world went from a place where armies had to march or sail to confront an enemy to a situation in which entire cities could be wiped out by one bomb and you might never see your attacker. Most wars historically were fought for land or to unite a people or to throw off a dictator or king. In our lethal modern age, wars were fought on an ideological component. The communist bloc might have been economically poor, but is ideologically quite active. Here is an anti-American cartoon promoting the false notion that the United States was stealing Europe's cultural patrimony after the war. We will take a cinematic look at the ideological struggle between East and West with a brief look at 4 films: The Manchurian Candidate, Fail-Safe, Dr. Strangelove, and Catch-22. The Manchurian Candidate, a 1962 political thriller starring Frank Sinatra, Lawrence Harvey, Janet Leigh, and Angela Lansbury. I am sending you an excellent 7-minute edited version and the last 11 minutes of the film. I highly recommend you putting this movie on your list of must-sees. It is a thriller. A decorated hero in the Korean War, American soldier Raymond Shaw, was captured and brainwashed by the North Koreans to be the killer of an American presidential nominee at the convention. The bizarre twist of this story is that the agent of the North Koreans running the soldier is his own American mother, and she is married to Raymond's stepfather, the man who was the vice presidential candidate who would become the new nominee and the next president. Frank Sinatra is the leading character, an Army major whose recurring horrific nightmares are the clues that compel him to investigate the strange, sad, lonely figure of Raymond, the American war hero. This movie was shelved shortly after release because of the assassination of President Kennedy the next year. The movie's theme was considered too shocking and was not widely released for about 20 years. Before the age of intercontinental missiles, which could detonate over enemy territory 30 minutes after launch, the threat of sudden war came from bombers, which would take hours to reach their target after takeoff from Air Force bases. Here's the plot. Through a horrible chain of miscommunication, a squadron of U.S. nuclear bombers is sent to obliterate Moscow, capital of the Soviet Union. Desperate attempts to call back the bombers, desperate attempts to shoot them down, fail time and again. The film is shot in black and white, lots of tight shots, very tense. Henry Fonda stars as the President of the United States, frantically trying to figure out a way to avoid Russian retaliation and all-out nuclear war. What will happen? I will give you a hint. The last scenes of the movie show New York City in freeze frame. On a personal note, I grew up in New York City, and from my bedroom window, I could see the Empire State Building. I could see the red lights of the TV antenna on top of the building. I remember reading as a child that if nuclear war ever came, the Soviet Union would explode a nuclear bomb directly over the Empire State Building. So I would have a front row seat for the nuclear holocaust. Very sobering. The end of this movie completely freaked me out. How strange that two movies with nearly identical themes would have opposite cinematic approaches. Failsafe is an ultra-realistic thriller. Dr. Strangelove is a dark, surreal comedy that is a cult classic. Directed by Stanley Kubrick and starring Peter Sellers and George C. Scott, again there's a major military oopsie. Another group of U.S. nuclear bombers is launched against the Soviet Union with resulting attempts to recall them. Some of the characters are over the top, admittedly, but that is the nature of satire. Peter Sellers is in a tour de force performance in three roles: the President, a British officer, and Dr. Strangelove. George C. Scott is the deranged General Turgidson. Catch-22 is a case of the novel being far superior to the film. It is a bitter, yet funny satire on war. The catch of the title refers to the military regulation that you can be excused from military service if you are crazy. But if you claim you are crazy, then you really aren't crazy, because who wants to be in the military during wartime on a battlefront except a crazy person? This is called a double bind. The rest of the plot is equally absurdist. An officer cannot find his eyeglasses, but he is so nearsighted that he needs his eyeglasses to find his eyeglasses. Then there is a character whose last name is Major. His rank is, of course, a major. So he is called Major Major. Trust me, in the novel, this is hilarious, but in the movie, not quite as funny. The setting is an American Air Force base in Italy during World War II, from where bombing missions originate. If you fly enough missions, you will be sent home. But the casualty rate in these missions is high. If you fly enough missions, eventually you will be shot down or killed. And the Air Force keeps raising the number of missions you have to fly before you can be sent home. The lead character, Yossarian, played by Alan Arkin, keeps trying to act crazy to be sent home, but he is surrounded by a collection of eccentric, neurotic, corrupt, dishonest, incompetent characters from all ranks. The novel is one of the most highly praised of the post-war period. It is biting and witty, something the movie could not replicate. Nearly every character in the movie is a recognizable star from the period, which is unusual. If you're a movie fan, you will have fun trying to identify each and every character. There are 4 clips from the movie. In the first, the doctor explains to Yossarian why he cannot be declared crazy and be sent home. In the second clip, Yossarian discovers on a bombing mission that the base wheeler dealer, Milo Binder, has traded his parachute for fresh eggs. In the third clip, Yossarian receives a combat medal, but he is so alienated that he goes to the ceremony naked. And in the last scene, well, the scene has little to do with the plot, but it's a beautiful piece of movie making. All pilots had to give the OK sign before taking off, and Yossarian gives his customary sign of approval.